In a last-ditch attempt to woo the Tory faithful up against True Blue Liz Truss, fishy Rishi Sunak has promised a 20% income tax cut, which he says would represent the largest slashing of the income tax in 30 years. But here's the catch. Won't come until the end of the decade. Yep, just 7 years to wait. So far, the former Chancellor, who berated Truss for her economic plan at the beginning of the contest, has suffered a huge backlash to his latest U-turn, which I would say is quite transparently designed to resurrect his flagging campaign. Simon Clarke, Sunak's deputy at the Treasury, but now a Truss supporter, said Liz will cut taxes in 7 weeks, not 7 years. And traditional Tory John Redwood questioned Rishi's whole philosophy, tweeting, "How will Rishi Sunak, with his current high taxes, achieve the growth to pay for tax cuts in 6 years' time? Why should we believe in his fantasy tax cuts for the next parliament when he has made the cost of living squeeze worse with tax rises now?" So, what do you think? Is fishy Rishi Sunak's 2029 tax cut pledge too little, too late? Dan at GBNews.uk, tweet me at GBNews. Our poll running there too. The results shortly. But joining me now to debate this is Conservative commentator Alex Dean, assistant comment editor at the Daily Telegraph, Olivia Utley, and former Conservative MP Jerry Hayes. So, Alex Dean, to me, this feels incredibly desperate. He spent the whole start of the campaign insisting he wasn't going to cut taxes. Now he says he will, but we're going to have to wait till 2029.
Yeah, look, you kind of feel sorry for the guy. You understand the situation that he's in. He was Chancellor until very recently, and the economy is the central battleground. So if on the one hand he said everything's terrible and we've got to do radical things, people would say, but you were Chancellor until 5 minutes ago. Surely it was on your watch that it became terrible. And if, on the other hand, he said, everything's broadly speaking fine and we should carry on as we are, people would say, or most people would say, well, probably it isn't. So he's really in a difficult situation. But this is actually the worst step for him to take, I think, because he should, I think, have just stuck to his guns and said, prudence is all, we've got to balance the books, because at least people believe that he stood for that. Now with this U-turn, he undermines all of the attacks he'd previously made on the other candidates, and especially Liz Truss, because you'll remember he said that other people's tax cuts was fantasy economics. Well, what are we supposed to think tax cuts offered 7 years from now are going to be, given the changing economic cycles that come so quickly? It's impossible to say where the economy is going to be 7 years from now. You either believe in tax cuts to stimulate growth or you don't.
I mean, Olivia Utley, it does feel like one of those pledges meant to hoodwink us, and then you read the small print and it says, oh, hang on a moment, you're going to have to wait until 2029.
I mean, absolutely. This feels very much like he's offering some red meat to Conservative members who I don't think the Chancellor has ever really understood. I think he's a very clever and talented man, but I think at heart he's a bit of a technocrat, and I don't think he's particularly interested in how the Conservative membership works. And I think Alex talked there, and you've spoken as well about the delay, which I completely agree with Alex, that either you have the philosophy, either you believe that tax cuts help to stimulate growth and therefore you can afford to have a low tax economy, a small state economy, and the economy is going to keep growing and growing and growing, or you don't believe that. But the other thing is, the other small print is that actually once you've priced in his national insurance rise, which is enormous, then I've got the figures in front of me here. And even in 9 years' time, someone earning an average salary in the UK, sort of £35,000, will only be about 50 quid better off than they were before. So it's not just that the delay is absolutely massive. It's also that the national insurance rise, I mean, income tax, great, but not actually that broader base of people as you might expect pay income tax. If you were really serious about cutting taxes, you would obviously be cutting national insurance tax and certainly not proceeding with the rise in national insurance tax. So it's, right. Rearranging debt as on the Titanic hardly even cuts it.
Jerry Hayes, you disagree and you think Liz Truss is being irresponsible with her tax cut pledges, am I right?
Of course she's being totally irresponsible. I mean, some of us, like me, in 1976, used to advise the shadow cabinet. We used to advise Margaret Thatcher. She believed in sound money. She never said we're going to have tax cuts unless we could afford it. She never said we're going to borrow. Liz Truss is now saying, oh, there's fiscal headroom of £30 billion. She might as well put the money on a horse at the Grand National. She'll probably get a better result. What Rishi Sunak is saying is, look, let's believe in sound money. We'll do it through growth not through borrowing. And that's the essence of it all. But I'll tell you what really depressed me tonight about the debate with dear old Liz, is she said something which will hit the headlines tomorrow. Now, you guys will probably agree with it, but it was a really stupid thing to say.
What?
She said, ignore Nicola Sturgeon.
Oh, yeah.
She's a attention seeker. That is an act of insanity, because whether you agree with Nicola Sturgeon, I don't agree with her at all. And I don't want another referendum for another generation, as was promised by Alex Salmond. The fact is, you've now upset a Scot, which is a stupid, stupid thing to do. The big question here is, do you guys want the Tories to win the next election? Or do you want to support Liz, who's not very good? She's so wooden you could, creosote her, not a great communicator, not very charismatic. Or do you want Keir Starmer to do it? Look at the opinion polls.
To be honest, Jerry, what I don't want is a perfectly varnished globalist like Sunak, who has all of the shiny oratory and policies that I simply do not trust. And I have to say, Olivia, tonight, I disagree with Jerry, because tonight what I've seen from Liz Truss is true conviction that she is going to battle Nicola Sturgeon, and true conviction on the point that I have been hammering home for the past 2 years: no more lockdowns. And I don't believe we would get either of those pledges from Rishi Sunak, Olivia.
Say that with a straight face.
I mean it. I mean it. I have been waiting, Jerry. I have been waiting for a senior politician in this country, aside from Lord Frost, to come out and pledge no more lockdowns. Well, finally tonight I got it. And to be honest, Olivia, if I was a Conservative Party member, I would vote for Truss on that pledge alone, because we're here because of lockdowns.
Nothing to do with lockdowns.
So would I. And I mean, the problem with Rishi Sunak, he's been pickled by the Treasury. That's the issue. I think that he is a competent politician. He's an intelligent man, but he's been taken over by the establishment. And I think that Liz Truss, the truth is, I wasn't a fan of her when this campaign began. I thought she was wooden. I can't hear you, I'm afraid, Joe.
Wait your turn, Jerry.
For years.
I can't hear that, but I think
we'll come back to you.
The amount that she's improved in the last 6 weeks is astonishing. I've never seen anything quite like it.
Yeah.
I think she's coming across pretty impressive now. And I think, as you say, she is a conviction politician. She's been a classical liberal all her life. I mean, she's changed her minds when the facts have changed. But actually, she's believed in one philosophy. And I think that being anti-lockdown exactly suits the type of politics that she's espoused, even ever since she was a Lib Dem. So I'm feeling pretty confident about a Liz Truss premiership now.
Alex Dean?
Yeah, she's always been on the side of freedom of the individual. That's why she spent a good amount of time in the think tanks on the right, for which she's received flack from the left. I mean, it's clear that there is some intellectual capital there, which many in the Labour Party don't like. And I suppose the other thing I would say about it is that whilst Rishi Sunak is certainly more polished, as Jerry suggests, the Truss campaign has very ably turned that negative into a positive, and saying, yes, I know I'm unvarnished, but, I speak the truth and I've got convictions. And I think people accept that. But moreover, in the end, the main topic you wanted us to debate tonight is the point. 2 weeks ago, Sunak didn't want tax cuts. Now he does. That's the kind of thing that really torpedoes a campaign below the waterline. And no matter how many times he interrupts in a debate against Liz Truss, or how many times Jerry interrupts tonight, those kinds of policies cannot be failed to be seen through by the British public.
Okay, well, I'm about to let Jerry loose. Jerry, go for it. The floor is yours. Come on.
She's a conviction politician, okay? She was a Liberal Democrat. She wanted to abolish the monarchy. She's a conviction politician. She passionately believed in being a Remainer. She's a conviction politician. She passionately believes in Brexit. For heaven's sake, remember the words of Jim Callaghan, actually, 1978. You can't spend your way out of recession. She's got a dash for growth, she says, and it's by spending. What happened to the Heath government? What destroyed the Heath government? It was the dash for growth under Barber. It led to inflation. It led to spiraling prices, and it led to a total disaster.
Okay, but Jerry, you have to accept, though, that we're in the economic predicament we're in today because Rishi Sunak has taken us to the biggest tax burden for 70 years, and he was responsible for giveaway after giveaway after giveaway as he locked down the economy that has led to part of this cost of living, or as I call it, the cost of lockdown crisis, Jerry. That's on him.
He actually saved the economy, and Boris Johnson was saying, what a wonderful chance we've got. The cabinet was saying, what a wonderful chance we've got. And now...
Well, Liz Truss opposed the national insurance rise in cabinet.
I mean, really, it's got to get real. Do the Tories win this election, or we just...
Alex Dean, you want to come in?
I do, please. I mean, it's very enjoyable to revisit history and get to rebut Jerry on the Heath government. But I think what brought the Heath government down was the unions and the inability to oppose the unions. And the Truss campaign, like most people on the fiscal right, aren't proposing to spend our way out of recession. They're proposing to have tax cuts to stimulate the economy. Yes, it's not what the beginning of the Margaret Thatcher era looked at, although it's much closer to the end of the Thatcher era with Nigel Lawson's budgets. It's exactly what Ronald Reagan pursued, if you like your example from the 70s and the 80s, about giving people more of their own money, getting the state off your back. And if it means the state going into debt to empower you to do that, that's where you get the growth. And in the end, I think John Redwood is right. If you're not going to have any tax cuts, how are you going to stimulate the kind of growth you say you're going to have to deliver tax cuts in 7 years' time?
But Reagan nor Thatcher did it through borrowing. That's the point.
Okay.
I mean, we're paying off.
Final word to you, Olivia. Final word to you.
Sorry, as Dan says, I mean, it's the cost of lockdown that we're paying off now. This genuinely was a once-in-a-generation price. It's not like everyday spending that Liz Truss is proposing to borrow to pay off. The other thing is that I just want to raise here is that Jerry talks about Rishi Sunak as though he's an automatic election winner. I don't quite understand why a swing voter would prefer technocratic, bureaucratic, middle managing Rishi to Starmer, who seems to be promising pretty much the same thing, but a little bit more.
Exactly. And you know what? We need a true Conservative in the job. I think, see how much she's grown over the past 6 weeks. Let's see what happens over the next 6 months. Of course, I hope she's going to be a Thatcher, not a Theresa May. Only time will tell. But right now, that pledge to not lock down the country again is good enough for me. Comment editor at the Daily Telegraph, Olivia Utley. Conservative commentator Alex Dean, and the always effervescent former Conservative MP Jerry Hayes. Thank you all so much. So who do you agree with on that? Is Rishi Sunak's 2029 tax cut pledge too little too late? From former on Twitter, Truss has no idea Rishi is at least being realistic. Honestly, we are in dire straits. From Luke, can promise anything you like if it's penciled in after the next general election because Tories won't be in power thanks to Sunak's mess over the last few months and then throwing his boss under the bus. I know where you're coming from, Luke. Steve on Twitter says yes and desperate, an illustration of his flip-flop policies and a liability to the Conservatives. Your verdict now in. This one isn't close, folks. 95% of you agree that Rishi Sunak's tax pledge is too little too late. Just 5% of you backing the former Chancellor.